Hello, this is Edith Newmeyer, and I am the author of the book, The Mystery of Adam. I want to take a break again today from Revelation and look again at this subject of rapture. I know people are confused about that, and I want to show some more proof that the rapture happens before the wrath of God, but after the tribulation. And the Holy Spirit showed me last night in Matthew 24, I read Matthew 24 again, that Jesus was talking about that. Now, just like Revelation, that it's not chronological. Matthew is not necessarily chronological either. It kind of goes back and overlaps. And so when you read Matthew, it's kind of the same principle. So apply the same principle. Now, I have talked about Matthew 24 before, and I looked at the abomination of desolation, and which is in verse 15. And I said that all of Matthew 24 is not necessarily about the way at the end, but it is really about the time between Jesus, when Jesus left, and Jesus's return. Okay, it's not just about this last period at the end. And of course, I said the tribulation idea is wrong anyways. Okay, we need to think in terms of tribulation is during the time of the saints, during the time of the church, all the way to the wrath of God. The rapture, and the wrath of God. Okay, so when the rapture happens, that's the kickoff for the day of the Lord. And Jesus comes to pick up his bride because he prepared a place for her. And then he is pouring out the wrath at the same time. Okay? So the saints will be with Jesus during the time when he is pouring out the wrath. And then they will come back with him when he actually steps on Mount Zion and he establishes his kingdom. So we're going to look at that today. I said I have already done, the abomination of desolation in chapter 15, which is talking about the destruction of the second temple, not the third temple. Destruction of the second temple. Because Jesus was saying that the whole thing started because he was saying the temple will be destroyed. Okay? And of course, the disciples didn't think that it would take 2,000 years, for the temple to be destroyed and then for Jesus to return. They actually believed Jesus would return during their lifetime. So they believed the temple and Jesus' return are kind of at the same event. So when Jesus has talked about, because they want to know when will be the time this will happen, when will be the time of your return, okay? Because that's what they believed. So then when he talked to them about these events, they could not place them very clearly. And so I think that's a reason why they when they retold the story, when Matthew retold the story, he kind of mixed things up. But it could have been also the Holy Spirit because he didn't want the truth out there, to unbelievers. So when we're talking here about the abomination of desolation, that is about the destruction of the second temple and all the things that were going on during that time. It was a horrible time, very horrible time. If you read Josephus, people had to really flee or else be killed in Jerusalem. Some people believe that this abomination of desolation has not happened yet because they believe there's going to be a third temple. But that's not true. It's false teachings. It's actually false teachings of Judaism. They want a third temple, but they don't realize that it would be not only an abomination, but it would be blaspheming God as well. Okay? When they called Jesus a blasphemer, that's worse. I mean, Jesus wasn't a blasphemer, but they called him a blasphemer. But they will commit they will blaspheme God when they build the temple, because they'll call it the temple of God when it's not the temple of God. The third temple will be never the temple of God. It may be a temple, it may be dedicated to God, but that does not make it a temple of God. The temple of God is built right now, and that's why the third temple would be an abomination. So, but I didn't want to talk about that today. I want to go to 29, because here in this first part, Jesus is describing all the bad things that will happen. And all these things have already happened. There's going to be wars and rumor of wars. There'll be false prophets. There will be persecution. So there will be bad things going on. Pestilence, famines. There was a great famine going on during the time when, just before the temple was destroyed. People had no food. So all this happened, okay, before. I mean, since the time of the church was founded, there's great tribulation and there's all these things happening. Then we go to 29 and it says, immediately after the distress of those days. Now, I have an NIV. In other Bibles, it says tribulation. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. What tribulation is he talking about? He's talking about the distress or the hardship they went through, which he just mentioned prior. Okay? The persecution, the wars, all the hardships. So the tribulation, the great tribulation they went through. So after the tribulation, this is what's going to happen. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Heavenly bodies will be shaken. So it's a solar kind of event. So where do we see this as well? Besides Isaiah, this is a quote from Isaiah 13:10 and 34:4. So Jesus was actually quoting Isaiah. So where do we see this again? We're going to see this again in Revelation. So when we go in Revelation, we kind of know how to place it. Because in Revelation 12, it says, I watched as he opened the sixth seal. Now remember, the seals are not God's wrath, but the seventh seal is. The seventh seal has 7 trumpets, and that's the wrath of God. And we see that at the end of chapter 6, that even the unbelievers say, hey, God's wrath is coming, and they're hiding. Okay, so this is what happens at the end of this sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat's hair. The whole moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky fell to earth as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. The heavens receded like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Now, this is the kickoff of the wrath of God. This is not actually yet the wrath of God. The 7 trumpets, which is the 7th seal, they will be the wrath. This is a kickoff. People are realizing, wait a minute, the wrath is coming, and they're hiding in their bunkers. So this is what then John was talking about what's going to happen. And this is exactly what Jesus mentioned here in 29. So we know this is similar, right? So after the tribulation of those days, okay, then this will happen, and that will what lead into, then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the people of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. What happens in Revelations when the Son of Man is coming in the clouds? He will bring the sickle, okay? He will get ready for the wine press. That is at the end of the wrath of God. We know that before he comes with the sickle, many things will happen. So look at either the 7 trumpets, the 7 or the 7 bowls, and they will go into detail about this wrath. Okay, not just what will happen at the end when Jesus actually makes his appearance in the clouds. Okay, so between the sun will get dark and the moon will not give its light, and all these things, the introduction to the wrath, there will be 6 trumpets that will destroy the earth, okay, and the people on it. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds, and he will have his sickle, and he will tread the winepress, and will destroy all the non-believers. Why do you think all of the people of the earth will mourn? Because he is coming to destroy them. That's why they're mourning. Look at the end of chapter 6 in Revelation. And the kings of the earth and the princes and the generals and the rich and the mighty and everyone else, both slave and free, hid in caves among the rocks and the mountains. And they call to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it? Yeah, they're mourning. Yes, they're screaming. They know it's coming, and they're still not repenting. That's actually what some parts in Revelation are saying as well. Okay, so you can see there is a commonality here between Revelation and what Jesus said. And why am I saying, it says here, all people on this earth will mourn? Why all people? Are the saints mourning too? No, because the saints will be where? They're coming with Jesus. So they don't have to mourn, do they? Because they're out. The rapture will happen, and if we look in it at Revelation 7, that's what before the wrath happens in chapter 8, the saints will be in heaven. And again, look at chapter 7, the second part, with the great multitude that came out of what? Great tribulation. They came out of tribulation. This is what he's talking about here. After that tribulation of those days. Okay, does that make sense now? Instead of interpreting it the way the Antichrist wants you to interpret it, to believe that there's actually great tribulation, what's really supposed to be the wrath of God. Don't be fooled. If you read the Bible, it tells you clearly there needs to be no interpretation. It's very, very obvious. Very obvious. Okay? This great multitude in chapter 7 those are the saints that came out of great tribulation. And where does Jesus describe the great tribulation? He describes it in Matthew 24 all the way to 29. Okay? That's great tribulation. Wars, persecution, famine, all kinds of stuff. That's what they came through. And then in 7, they're in heaven. They're in heaven. Why? Because Jesus is returning. Okay? Jesus is returning. And at the end of the wrath of God in the 7th trumpet, Jesus is coming in the clouds on the white horse. And with him, the saints. They didn't have to be mourning because they're happy. They're celebrating. Okay, they're with the Lord in the huppah, in the marriage rooms. So then he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds. Now, these elect are most likely these people that are sealed, the 144,000 in chapter 7 that were sealed. They were sealed. They did not make it into the marriage chamber. They are those foolish virgins that you can read about in the next chapter of Matthew, Matthew 25. You're reading about the foolish 5 virgins that did not make it into the huppah. Okay? And they're now staying back. And some of them may realize what happened and follow Jesus. Okay? Even during this wrath of God. But they will not have a chance to be the bride of Christ. They will be the guest to the wedding. They will be the guest to the wedding. And that's another theme to pick up. But they will be the guests. And he is gathering these elects from the 4 corners that are now the guests to the wedding. Because the wedding will start. And you can see that in Revelation better. Okay? And I'm not going there at all right now. I'm talking about Matthew. But I want to just show you that. So then it says, Jesus says, you need to be prepared because most people are very confused. He says it will be the same as the day of before Noah. And nobody knows, and that he's going to, in the next one, that people are just totally oblivious to what's going on. They follow their own stuff. And he says, then, see, in 40, it's really interesting. And they know nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. So the coming of the Son of Man, what happens first? Of course, the rapture. 40 tells you that. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a hand mill, and one will be taken and the other one will be left. This is talking about the rapture. Okay? Even though we've seen the rapture up here, but now it's overlapping again, and it gives you more detail what's going to happen. See, up here you didn't see the rapture, even though you know the rapture is happening on the timeline there. Okay, the rapture will happen right there when the sun will go dark. We may experience this in the 29. We may experience this still. But then right after that, or during that time, just before the wrath starts, that's when this will happen. Okay? And I know it's confusing because it's not chronological. It seems like the Bible does a lot. I think maybe the people in during the time of Jesus, that's the way their thinking went. Okay? That's the way their storytelling went. But here again, this is now talking about the rapture. Okay, 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 men will be grinding and a hand mill and will be taken and the other one was left. That is now the rapture, which really should already be in here during this time when the sun gets darkened. Because we see that in Revelation. Okay, after the 6th seal, God says, stop. I have to do something first. He seals the 144,000, which you will see are the select or the elect that will go through the wrath of God. Okay? Because you can see he's gathering them after the wrath of God. But there's also a group, the multitude, which is in heaven, which we then see addressed further down in verse 40. Okay? You will see that. And it says in 42, therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. This goes into what? The 10 virgins, because he tells you that later on. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time the thief was coming, he would have kept watch. So again, it's going into this, be watchful. Don't be fooled. Don't be like the foolish virgins. Okay? So all this is overlapping, but you need to kind of know the timeline, kind of have that in mind. And then you can place these things on it. Some may overlap and some may kind of be chronological, but many things may be not really in order, which you can see here in Matthew, especially in the section that I'm reading right now. Okay? They kind of all kind of intermingle with each other. And so for most people, if you don't have the Holy Spirit, they don't make sense at all. They don't make sense. You have to know everything. You have to be studying. You have to know everything. And most of all, you cannot listen to these preachers that maybe just come out of seminary. You know, they have head knowledge. They maybe even can quote you the Bible. But in reality, they don't have the Holy Spirit. And especially for these things, you have to have the Holy Spirit. It is too, I want to say complicated. It's not complicated if you have the Holy Spirit. It is complicated for a person who does not have the Holy Spirit. Then it is complicated. So again, read Matthew 24 through 38, or even to the end, and compare it to Revelation 6. And, actually you need to be aware of Revelation 6:12 through the end, and chapter 7 and chapter 8, because chapter 8 then is going into the wrath of God. You have to understand this timeline. This is the way the timeline goes. Okay? There's going to be tribulation before the rapture. There's going to be the rapture, and then there's going to be the wrath of God. If you don't understand that timeline, you can't place these things correctly. Okay? Because they're all mixed up. The same what I have talked about before about the abomination that causes desolation. I said there is no place in the Bible where there is a third temple mentioned, or the rebuilding of the third temple mentioned. No place whatsoever. Not in Revelation, not in Paul's teaching. Nobody. The only place where this third temple exists is in the temple of the false teachers of Judaism. Okay? And, of course, of Zionists. Zionists push this agenda, okay, of the third temple. Why? Because they want all nations. They're already talking about 70 nations. 70 is a number of completion. Okay? They already want all these nations, all of the nations, because 70 is the complete, 7 is the number of completeness, right? So they want all of the world to come to Jerusalem and come and worship in that false temple, which is going to be an abomination. No Antichrist needs to sit in that temple. Okay? It's blasphemous. Okay? It's blasphemous. If they would ever rebuild the temple, it would be an abomination if they would just rebuild the temple and call it the temple of God. God would be so outraged. And if anybody goes there and worships, or even, steps in the temple to even attempt to go in the temple, you will have the wrath of God upon yourself. Okay? Do not be fooled. Do not be fooled. Now, you're talking about the mark of the beast. Well, that is definitely, you will have a mark on yourself if you think that this temple would be the temple of God. I mean, that would be it. I mean, you'll be blaspheming at the Holy Spirit. And I'm not sure, if there's any, if you can be saved after that. So be extremely careful. And that's why I'm going to mention it again. This was really about these, the tribulation, false tribulation, and the rapture, and the wrath of God. Okay? Worry about the wrath of God, not the tribulation. Okay, that's what Jesus says. Don't worry about losing your life. Worry about losing your soul. Okay, so what if your head is cut off? Nobody's gonna cut your head off. So what if they kill you? That's what Jesus says. Don't worry about it. Okay, if they take you before the officials, before the synagogues. That's what Jesus says. I even think he said that in Matthew 24. Don't worry about that. Worry about your soul, people, because that's what you're losing during, the if you're still alive during the wrath of God. That is a lot worse, because you know what? If you're left during the wrath of God, there's a reason why you're left. Okay, and you're left because you denied your Messiah. That's why. So, anyways, I will be finishing up today. Read these things again, and let the Holy Spirit, absolutely let the Holy Spirit guide you.